Mr. Speaker, will you please call the House to order?
The bill is passed.
We'd like to get a budget that represents the interests of the people who are standing here with me now.
To be part of the struggle to achieve a better society for all.
Who here in this chamber feels that their children should be punished for something that they did?
Hi, and welcome to Assembly Update. I'm Assemblyman Phil Ramos. I represent the 6th District, which are the towns of Brentwood, Bayshore, and Central Islip. As most people know, I represent a district that's very diverse, and I've spent the past 13 years attempting to organize the different segments of our community in a way that they can participate civically and really get more response from government that represents their respective needs. This month is Asian Heritage Month, and I have been working with the Asian community on Long Island to try and organize them to learn a little bit about the issues and their experiences and what they need from government. And today in the New York State Assembly, we had a great celebration sponsored by Assemblyman Ron Kim, and I had the opportunity to meet a young lady who was really inspiring to the community that she spoke to. And she is the author of a book. Her name is Patricia Park. She's author of a book called Re-Jane, which talks about the experience of an Asian American woman in this country and some of the issues that have take place in that particular community. So today's show is going to be a little bit different from most of my shows. And what we're going to do is we're going to have Patricia speak out on some of the issues, and then we're going to enter into a dialogue about some of the issues concerning the Asian community. So, with that said, I would like to welcome you, Patricia. And I was so inspired by your dissertation that it would be great if you could speak a little bit about some of the issues, give your presentation, and perhaps creates a little bit of awareness about the Asian community.
Sure. No, thank you so much for having me, Assemblyman Ramos. I was born and raised in Flushing, Queens, the child of Korean-Argentine immigrant grocers. When I was growing up, I found myself continually looking to the east and to the west, to Long Island with its sprawling mansions and public schools with sports like field hockey and lacrosse, and to Manhattan with its enviable mix of glamour and grit. And you might say my looking to the east and to the west are extensions of a larger metaphor on identity. Growing up, Queens pride, it felt like an oxymoron. More often than not, it felt like Queens reluctance. It might have been the place you were from, but it wasn't the place you stayed. Queens doesn't get much in the way of media representation. I mean, we have All in the Family, The Nanny, The King of Queens. These are hardly reflections of high culture. Even the Jeffersons, who lived next door to Archie Bunker, were quick to move on up to the east side. We were scrappy outer boroughites, and we lived literally and metaphorically in the shadows of Manhattan. Being from Queens, for me, was a reminder that I was kind of, but not quite 100%. I was a New Yorker, kind of, just like I was an American with an asterisk. I never quite felt like I belonged. Growing up, I was always asked the question, where are you from? And when I'd answer Queens, New York, America, I'd invariably face the follow-up, no, where are you really from? The question was a reminder of my outsider status in this country. I didn't realize I was American until I was 17, despite having a blue passport. You'd think then I'd find solace within my ethnic community. And I think a lot of Westerners have this expectation that you automatically belong to your ethnic group. Yet despite living in a community of Korean Americans, I didn't quite feel like I fit in. Korean Americans' households didn't value literature as a profession the way they did math and science. You were expected to choose a profession that was predictable, delivering reliable returns on investment. It was the sensible thing to do. And I think this is consistent with the Western picture of the model Asian American minority. Sometimes within the Korean American community, I felt I had to apologize for my creative side. For one, I asked too many questions. I made too many comments that were definitively outside the box. I don't want to go so far as to say I was labeled a freak, but I never quite felt like I found my footing within the community. Ironically enough, I felt like a minority within an already minority community. I went against type. So I channeled all of this feeling of being an outsider among outsiders, into my creative writing. And I'm happy to share the news that I just published my first novel with Penguin called Read Jane. It's a story of a woman named Jane Rhee, a biracial Korean orphan who journeys from Queens to Brooklyn to Seoul and back. It's also a modern-day retelling of Charlotte Bronte's classic novel, Jane Eyre, which makes it something of a postmodern mashup of my two formative cultural influences, my ethnic Korean heritage and the Victorian English novels that shaped my literary consciousness, all set in the backdrop of my native New York. In Read Jane, I created a heroine who is caught between worlds, Queens versus the cosmopolitan city, Korea versus America. Jane Rhee's life, just like my own, is ruled by this Korean principle of nunchi. There's no translation for it in English, but it's the ability to walk into a room, read the situation, and anticipate how you're expected to behave. It's knowing to pour your elder's water glass first before your own. It's having common sense coupled with emotional intelligence. My character Jane has a friend named Eunice. She's a total sci-fi geek. She went to MIT. She graduated from MIT and took a job with Google. And Eunice describes nunchi as a kind of Tolkien eye of Sauron, this all-knowing stink eye that monitors your every social misstep. The academic equivalent might be like the Foucauldian panopticon, a 24-hour social surveillance resuscitated straight from utilitarianism. Jane leaves the Korean community in Queens to au pair for an academic family in gentrifying Brooklyn. And she realizes her nunchi radar is all thrown off. More often than not, Jane feels paralyzed like a deer in headlights as she moves from one cultural context to the next. The values that were true to her Korean community are turned upside down among the white bourgeois. And it's turned inside out again when she travels to Seoul, which is a place that she was told her whole life she belongs to. She was told her whole life it was the motherland. And she lives there, she travels there, and she realizes, hey, this is not the place I'm really from. Jane returns to New York, to Queens, with a renewed sense of self, and the realization that she can carve out her own space on the American landscape, despite her being different, despite her being the other. In Read Jane, I wanted to give voice to the multiplicity of identities within the Asian American community. What's wonderful about Asian Pacific American Heritage Month is that it celebrates the diversity of Asian Americans in this country. But I think it would do us all good to be mindful of these issues, and not just in the month of May. The more diverse voices we have representing our community, the more the Western gaze, G-A-Z-E, will not be quick to categorize us as one anonymous, homogenous mass.
Patricia, it's a wonderful, wonderful presentation, very fitting for this Asian American month. And if we were really to look at that and remove the fact that it's an Asian culture, a person from an Asian culture that you're talking about, there's a lot of parallels there between the immigrant experience of many other communities. The struggle for identity, the issues, the being torn between two worlds, and even the issues of feeling not like one does not belong to their native culture, when they're judged as an American by their native culture, and yet being here and not being considered American. But the true definition of American does not mean that we all have to be the same. It means that we bring the best of our respective cultures and we impart it into this country to bring out the best of what we can make here.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I'd like to think that my novel speaks to anyone who's just felt disenfranchised, doesn't quite belong, and they say with novel writing, you achieve the universal through the specific. So I took my specific experiences as a Korean American, well, you can mix in some Argentine there, who's from New York and is trying to find her community. And I use that experience to just kind of speak to this, as you're saying, not only an American, but I think a universal human issue of trying to find a place where you belong, and again, carving out your own niche in the patchwork of society.
What we find is that subsequent generations to the first generation that comes here start to have a different optic and create more awareness amongst our society here in the United States about their respective cultures, because normally first generation is struggling to survive when they get here. They're focused on one thing. They don't have time for civics. They don't have time for politics. They're busy creating that American dream that they sacrificed for to get here. And it's so important that the Asian culture, just like many other cultures, enter the phase where you're starting to have many elected officials, such as Ron Kim. You're having people write books such as yourself in all segments of society, and that they're starting to create awareness of a culture that that many people in this country see as limited to areas like Flushing and Chinatown, and don't have much knowledge of. But it's important that the newer generations start to create that bridge and create more awareness and bring the issues of the Asian community to the forefront so that government can respond to it.
Yeah, it's really amazing. I mean, who'd have thunk that me, I'm a first generation American. I guess my parents are Korean grocers who came to this country with a handful of English words. Mm-hmm. And when you were talking about the first generation, or the first wave of immigrants that comes here and they're focused on the American dream, they don't have time for civics and politics. Forget civics and politics, they don't even have time for language. Mm-hmm. And when I was growing up...
And they normally immerse themselves around people who speak their language, because that's vital to their survival here when they first get here.
Yeah, I mean, communication, just being able to convey your message is so crucial. And when I was growing up, there was not a lot of dialogue, between my parents and myself, and just in general, that generation and my generation. And yet, I think still, we were able to communicate in a way, and the community has kind of come together, yeah, you produce people like Assemblyman Ron Kim, who does then, give back to the community and represent.
And it's important that we put the perspective and the history of Asian Americans here in this country in perspective with the rest of society, because there's a lot of lack of knowledge and misinformation about a lot of the things. We hear a lot of debate about the immigration issue in this country, and we hear pundits all the time on TV talking about how all they want is the same rules for everybody, that all Americans should go by the same rules. But yet they forget one fact of history, that Asians had different rules for many years in this country. In fact, there was something called the Asian Exclusion Act, which meant that an Asian born in the United States was not allowed to be an American citizen. So that, with many groups, those same rules were not applied to them. So in many ways, it's a little bit hypocritical to talk about the same rules should apply to everybody when they have been changed. In fact, we had a group of people, immigrants who came to this country, who never got to see that majestic lady in New York Harbor, the Statue of Liberty, because they were chained to the bottom of ships. So different immigrant groups were held to different standards with different rules. But we should learn from that history. The Asian community is part of the evolution of this country, and its history is important to learn from so that we can, in the end, become a better country. If somebody would like to purchase your book, how would they do it?
They can go to any bookstore. It's available also online at Amazon, at Barnes & Nobles, all those retailers as well. Thank you so much, Assemblyman Ramos.
It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Thank you.